afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, and all my NB friends. You are tuned to Metro Arts on KGNU. My name is Aston, and I will be your host for this afternoon, and I am a representative for the Board of Directors for Sacred Voices. That's right, this is Sacred Voices on KGNU. With me today, I have Karia White, who has been a poet featured at a few of our recent open mics. But first, let me tell you a little bit about the organization. Sacred Voices is a nonprofit organization based in Denver, Colorado. We do poetry workshops for youth in the metro area, as well as put on a monthly open mic. Currently, it is virtual. We are hosting it on our Facebook page, and that is on the fourth Friday of every month. If you are interested in finding out more about our organization, visit us online at sacred-voices.org or visit us on Facebook or Instagram at Sacred Voices Denver. Our guest today, like I said, is Karia White. Karia, how are you doing?
I am doing so good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. So you have been featured at a couple of our shows. You were at our January show where you spit a couple poems, and then again at last month's show. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself real quick?
So I am originally from New Jersey. I love to plug my state, but right now I go to the University of Colorado Boulder, and I'm studying international affairs, ethnic studies, and political science. I create art-based healing projects in Denver, and poetry has kind of been the way that I've discovered my voice since coming out here. So I'm a poet, I'm a visual artist, graphic designer, all of that kind of stuff, but I'm a student and an educator before I'm any of those things.
Very cool, very cool. Well, I have a few poems that we can listen to this afternoon. We're going to start this show off with one that you performed in January at our virtual open mic, so listeners can get a feel for what you're like. So without further ado, this is Karia White. Take a listen.
2020. It is my first class of the day in August of my senior year at college. And I am sitting Zoom University pretty, cameras on and microphone muted. It is a class about microeconomics. And my professor, Alabaster, and the embodiment of a hegemon, shares his screen to the clippings of Breonna Taylor shooting and protests following. We are to discuss because it has been a heavy summer. 5 minutes found weeping miles to my lips, and he stares unto the blueness of the screen where I can only imagine he witnesses a live carcass gaping with eyes right before it is about to be hit. And he asks the only brown box in the ocean of ivory, Miss White, it looks like you're feeling a lot. Do you have something you want to say? What I really want to say is I hate it here. No, what I really want to say is I'm tired. What my body wants you to know is that this cannon boom of a year has done more damage to our collective psyche than we can imagine, that there is no magic reset button for the trauma on the 1st of January, 2021. And I suppose that my third suicide attempt would lend itself to the oaky flavors of wine bottles and pills, or that my arms were faceless so it seemed less personal to carve them than to mark up a tree, that I am going to meet a carpenter that I'm not sure I believe in, but y'all have somehow convinced entire generations will place the final nail in my mahogany coffin. And I guess what I really want to say is my thought process behind this is if I have to go out, it won't be another story. Cop shoots Black woman and nobody rallies behind it. It will be me. But anyway, what I want to say is that humanity does not exist in America. What I really want to say is that the first time I ever saw my budding breasts in the mirror, I cried that I was now this woman that Malcolm X said is thrown by the wayside, how I hummed red and smelled like copper. I waited for them to put me out in the Hudson because pain is a prerequisite for love for Black women. Become giant woman who most people couldn't even tell you isn't in New York or isn't angry. How my nightly routine now consists of dabbing blood on my cheeks and pressing my clothes to be casket sharp so they know exactly where the 22 bullet holes are. And I tell my neighbors that the ones that missed them will be far more important than the ones that hollowed out my body. What I guess I want to say is, why am I here? No, that's a question. I guess what I have to say is a question. Can it be a question? I'm not sure I have a statement without some man coming to decapitate my hands. So of course I'll frame it as a question. Spare some walking mommy issues and Air Force Ones their fragility. No, of course, I don't have a statement, but here are some things I would like to ask. Why are we so afraid of revolution? When do we start caring about Black women? Is it possible to piggyback off the idea that we do live in a white supremacist state? Are we afraid to try something new? What is communism? What is socialism? What is democracy? And please show your work. Is all this pain necessary? Why do presidential debates sound like, do Black people matter? You have 2 minutes starting now. Sounds like, when are we going to do something? Where do we go when you don't let our bodies be quiet? How many deaths have I manifested through my attempts on my own life? Does my life matter to me? Sounds like, do white men shut up? Are Black people the embodiment of exploitation of a people with no remuneration? If a Black man is shot in broad daylight and his back is turned with the cameras out, who was trying to disengage? Modern day tree in a forest. If we turn a dead Black woman's name into a meme, how long before it cycles out through Twitter? Do we debate white people's humanity on live television? Can history be disagreed with if we never learned it? Do cops get to be the judge, jury, and executioner everywhere or just in a police state? Sounds like, do Proud Boys tell me to unmute my microphone or should I stand back and stand by? And as I sit there arriving at my words and a million different prayers, trying to piece together some dual consciousness to speak through my teeth, that I do not have anything to say. So I see you, Black woman, your journal filled with your last words, and I suppose you become a poet when you don't know what else to do. When a Zoom call could not catch the sucking of my teeth and the humdrum of a lecture at 2:20 that isn't quite ready to not be decolonized. And I guess what I really want to say is, some days you have questions and years later you have answers. So what I guess I really want to ask is, whose year is it to give the answers?
And if you're just joining us, you're listening to Sacred Voices on Metro Arts. And you were just listening to Karia White perform a poem at Sacred Voices January virtual open mic. And we have Karia with us now. It's a very powerful poem.
Thank you.
What do you have to share with that? Initial thoughts, listening to yourself?
It's always so weird to hear it back because I normally don't listen to my poetry back. I kind of just write it, I perform it, and then it kind of goes by the wayside. But that poem, it still rings true today. Those questions that I was asking, I still am asking in my body, in my relationships, in my relationship to myself. And I think that when I had wrote that, it was for a Messages from the Void. Setu Shango had put on an open mic and had asked me to come spit. And I was like, I don't know what I want to say. After the year that we just had, and it was, just a very heavy poem. I remember crying throughout writing that poem. And that was one of the first poems that I've ever had to write multiple days and multiple segments. And I think the amalgamation of 2020 really prepared me to write that poem and to ask those questions. But yeah, it still is a very powerful one that sits in my body. I love performing that poem. Yeah.
It's a very powerful performance. Setu was a guest either a month or two ago, so I'm familiar with them. You presented a lot of different things in that. I'm assuming that's based on a true story.
Yeah.
It seems unfortunately believable. One of the things you brought up in there is thinking about, different ways that society could be done. You were saying, what is communism, what is socialism, all of that stuff. So I'm curious, if you were the president one day or something like that, and you had one chance to make one big sweeping change to the nation, what would it be?
Ooh, that is a hard question. Well, first, I don't believe that there should be presidents. I don't think that the current situation that we have right now is really one that is working, that is one that is equitable for everyone to kind of share their voice. I don't think that we have democracy as it's situated right now here. But if I could change anything, it would be number one, the way that we learn history. I think that is a really powerful way that poetry allows us to tell our stories. And I'm always situated within Black feminist thought. And the main way that Black women tell their stories has always been so beautiful to me. And it's a practice that I, try to embody and honor, which is, if you look at the way Black women tell their story, it's primarily through memoir and poetry. And I think that kind of medium to work in allows us to say the things that sometimes people just like don't want to read in a full-throated textbook. And so the way that we learn history, the way that we present history will inevitably lead us to a future depending on how we're engaging with that history. And so I think that the responsibility of the poet is to present history in a way that can be engaged, can be accessible for people, and also is a floodgate. Like I say this in my classes that I teach all the time, that I am less concerned with getting you to regurgitate an answer. I am more concerned with getting you the skills and ability to how to find an answer. And so if I can present a topic or a way of thinking, and it opens you up to a possibility, it opens you up to finding a new book or a new poem and how to engage in that, then I think we'll be better off. I think education is one of the main ways that we are not doing service to the children of this nation. And I think that poetry is just a beautiful way to do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Certainly listening to a lot of the poems throughout various open mics, I've learned a lot of tidbits of history that, I never got when I was in school, learning about, the Tulsa Massacre or the continuous genocide of the indigenous peoples. Right. There's just a lot that goes unsaid in the education system. Let's talk a little bit about 2020. Oh. I know there's a lot to talk about there. But one of the things that happened recently is kind of a resolution to the George Floyd case, the conviction of Derek Chauvin, or whatever his name is. A lot of people were saying that was a cathartic moment. It felt like the end of something. But then a lot of other people who I've seen have said quite the opposite, that it's not as important, not quite such a big deal. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I have so many thoughts on that, but I'll try and keep it short here. I think that it's important when we're framing these conversations that we really understand that no community is a monolith. So we often say the Black community or the indigenous community or the Latinx community, and that is just not a comprehensive way of engaging with people in their personal stories that kind of shape how they are coming to a conversation. And so while there were people that, saw that as a very cathartic moment, I was personally not one of them. I remember sitting with a good friend of mine, and we were kind of watching CNN unfold, and there was like a tightness in my throat, and I was not satisfied because I was like, he is still not here with us. And a lot of people were framing it as accountability. And I think this is what the system does. It prolongs the periods of justice. And so we start to see like the base level of accountability. And I'm not even quite sure I agree with framing it as accountability. Base level accountability being something that is rejoiced over. And the fact of the matter is none of these people that we have lost to police brutality are ever coming back. Gianna Floyd, who is now 7, I believe, will never have a father again. And that is the real reality that we have to engage in with this system, is that it is active genocide. And I'm very intentional about using that word. What is going on with our missing and indigenous, murdered indigenous siblings, that is genocide. And it's an ongoing genocide that has been embarked since the inception of this country. So yeah, those are my opening thoughts on that. But yeah,
I'm sure that we could spend this whole 30 minutes talking about it. I know I could.
Yeah.
But we'll move on to new topics. So I have some more poems for us to take a listen to. And after that, we will reconvene and see what we have to say about these.
Awesome.
Once again, this is Karia White. Let's take a listen.
My mother tells me that she used to be thin. The last sliver of water aching down the length of the neck, a beanpole reaching up towards the sky. She tells me that I ruined her body. Her stomach now empty from carrying a moon. I have left her with an empty plot of land where blood used to be. And so I tried to hang myself from the sky and light up a last shimmer of a ripple in a lake of her eye to make being her daughter something worthy of reverence. But I turn out to be more circle and wide-hipped, gaping and awkward, and something she is not proud of. She tells me to stay out of the kitchen, and so I swallow myself whole, making no noise in her garden. In my mother's garden, it is always winter somehow. We are big-boned and built for an empty harvest. Heirlooms are inherited from an empty basket. Teaches your stomach how to be hollow, or at least learn to stretch our hips and trade the meaning of void for full. We learn to walk back from the earth empty-handed. My body becomes the only thing I have ever tried to kill. Some days I wake up next to my body, outside of my body, and it feels like the closest thing I will ever get to a crime scene. I dig a hole somewhere in the middle of a morsel of flesh I have yet to feed in a generation. Stomach hollow, I place a vacant ad for rent as if someone can take better care of this earth. No past life that has inhabited this body can make their way fast up enough my throat. My mouth has been closed like a refrigerator door, and I am learning to be consumed rather than to consume anything. When I look at this swollen-bellied girl, there is a faint echo that says, Black girls don't have eating disorders. And I curl up into the pit of my stomach. How did you get this way? How did you shrink this way that no one sees me in plain sight? Disappearing girl is only believable if you can fit her in between your teeth and be less Sprite can in their mouth. So you reach back into your throat and try to grab your thin mother, spinning and swirling. She makes her way into your stomach, and you then turn to starvation when bulimia doesn't do anymore. Snacks start to sound like giving up. We start guzzling coffee or walking around grocery stores to nowhere and no basket to fill our stomach. The trail of food slithering down my throat sounds like surrender. I am utilizing the skill of cutting onions to cut myself into more palatable sizes. I stay out of the kitchen and move into my throat, acquaint myself of what this breath means to be narrowing and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking smaller and smaller and smaller until there is nothing left. And my mother sees me and her, and I return to her body. Kind of depressing, I know. But, you know, thanks. I have 3 more. They're pretty short. And I'm always like laughing at myself because I'm saying like I'm never writing, but that's just not true when I look at like my notes app. So I think what I will do now is an ode to Ma'Khia Bryant. Yeah. Today I am sad. There has been a tightness in my throat that no one knows how to talk to. A freight train of bodies visits me every night, and there are limbs hanging out the windows like ivy on opium-funded buildings. I try to keep my fingers busy when someone looks at me kissing their dead hands, and I smile. When the foolish boy asks me why I am not happy, I respond that there is a riot in my fingers, a protest in my bones, and that I was born from a womb passed down from glass and splinters, and that I have never known this peace you so desperately want to believe is a part of America's origin story. I respond that there has been a pit in my chest since 2013, and I occasionally try to fill it with Skittles or tea, but even now the boot and blocks in the street don't bring me much solace. I respond that while all Black children look gorgeous and blue, I have never wanted to return a color to the sky so badly as it carousels bodies in the middle of the street, a promise as it intervenes with the red ghost that he will be back always, and there will always be more names to say. And here comes the train, in the morning now too, right on time.
And if you are just joining us, that was Karia White performing at Sacred Voices April virtual open mic, and we have Karia with us in the studio. 2 different poems there. What are your initial thoughts on those?
I was immediately taken back to the first time I had ever performed at Sacred Voices, and like just hearing the progression of how my voice has changed, and how like my writing style has changed has been like really, really special. And I'm always very grateful to Sacred Voices. But those two poems break my heart in two when I like listen to that back. It just the emotion that went behind writing those two. I remember the Micaiah Bryant piece. I hadn't written for a minute since the January Sacred Voices, and something about tragedy just works into my blood and my fingertips, and I just cannot stop writing. So I had written 30 poems in the span of like that week. And I was really excited to share them. And as I was reading them at Sacred Voices that day, I think as soon as I got off the call, I immediately broke down on my bed and just cried. Something that I say often is people are not meant to grieve this much. And Black people in this country are in a constant state of grief. And it is a miracle that I find it to be a blessing that, my ancestors have gifted me with all of these different ways to express myself and mediums to express myself in. Yeah,
very powerful stuff. I've talked a lot with another one of our board members, Bree Hill, who you know. And based on those conversations, it sounds like you're a very busy person. So you saying that you wrote 30 poems in a week is not too surprising to me. What is your workflow like? How do you get all of this stuff done?
First and foremost, I always make time to write and read. If you can find me anywhere in Denver, it's either at a park or a bookshop or a coffee shop. And I think I prioritize reading and writing because that is really all we have left. I'm a person that says that all we have is our word and our bond. Our word is our bond. And so if I am of the belief that you cannot accomplish something that you cannot articulate. And so that is a manifestation practice for me, and it has to come first. It has to keep me grounded. My spirituality has to be the first and foremost thing that I lead with. Otherwise, I don't have enough room to kind of branch out into all of these other projects, and I don't have anything left to give if I don't give myself the words to say and do the things.
It can be very important and very cathartic to make time for making art. So I had one question about you, hearing that poem about Micaiah Bryant. One of the things that we've unfortunately seen a lot, because this has happened so many times, is the pipeline from tragedy to hashtags and social media activism, mostly from, white ally activists. What is the difference between, performative activism, such as like making a black square your profile picture and using a victim's name and a hashtag, and genuine like activism? Where's the difference there?
I think for people to say that they are an activist, you have to be active. And like one of the things that I love that you brought up was the black square. Like that is a very passive thing to do. It's an easy thing to do, quite frankly. And activism is hard, and you often do not see the fruits of your labor. And Mariam Kaba talks about this, where a lot of people kind of get discouraged with win-loss binary, and they're like, we lost this one. And anybody that's involved in activism spaces knows that there is no like calculus that we can kind of situate wins and losses, and it's the work all the time. And the work often happens within your body. It happens within your interpersonal relationships, how you are dealing with conflict and all of these other places that it arises. But I think the difference between performative activism and activism, more holistically, is that self-education. What are you doing every single day to make sure that you are standing in solidarity with the people that you are standing in solidarity with, or saying that you are? It's very easy to, do a land acknowledgement. It's very easy to say we stand with Black lives. It is so easy to just, repost labor that has already been done on social media in, the forms of squares, even with just information. It takes a lot more than just reposting something. You have to actually go and read it. Oftentimes, the information is not going to be circumscribed to, 7 to 10 posts on Instagram. There's a lot of labor that goes into that education where you can shrink it. But most people are so caught up with having it accessible in a way that shrinks the entire theory down. And theory is supposed to be hard. It's supposed to move things, and therefore it should be able to be understood. But as far as going and doing your work, that is of chief concern. It should be of chief concern if you are actually trying to find ways to do better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's hard, and it's supposed to be hard. It's not quite so easy. Like, what is the term for it? Where you, like a desktop activist or something like that, where you just stay on your computer.
Slacktivist, yeah.
Yeah. So, that brings up the larger question. There were a lot of protests last year, and as I understand it, you were there for a lot of them, and you had your own experiences there. What was that like?
That entire summer, I just call it the summer from hell. It was so bad. It was simultaneously the worst summer of my life. I think my mental health hit an all-time low. But it was simultaneously also one of the most beautiful summers of my life. I have met my political family that I, am in community with now through that summer. But like I was saying before, people are not meant to grieve this much. And it's sad how many names you can cycle through and still not get to all of them. There was an action that happened at the Capitol a while ago in solidarity with Ma'Khia Bryant's family, where a group of activists, an autonomous action, placed tombstones at the Capitol. And I believe that there were like over 500 of them. And what struck me the most was there was a couple, I think, just a couple of them that had unknown on them. And that was very jarring to see and to have a visual of that. And that's just the reality. We do not know all of the names that come with this type of state-sanctioned violence, and we are just engaging with the ones that have been reported. And so if there's anything that I saw from last summer was just how depressing a lot of this work is, and to be doing and marching and to know very little, or to even situate yourself in the fact that you are not going to see a lot of the fruits from this labor in this lifetime. And that's something that I'm very comfortable in, and I love the generations that come after me more to do this work right now. But yeah, it was depressing, but it was also very beautiful. And there's something to be said about the beauty and solidarity and the beauty of finding genuine and authentic connections through this kind of work to fight for our lives, because that's really what we're out here doing, is fighting for our lives.
Yeah, it's very important work, and it's good to see it continue. So we're running out of time here. I wanted to give you a chance to plug yourself. Where can people find you on Instagram, Facebook, if you have a website or YouTube or anything like that?
You can find me on I Am Karia, IAMKARIA on Instagram, and then all of my other handles and organizations that I work with and who I love very dearly are also plugged in my bio. And yeah.
Great. You have been listening to Sacred Voices on Metro Arts. If you are interested in attending or performing at our next open mic, it is on the fourth Friday of every month. That will be 2 weeks from today. That will be May 28th, and that will be at 6:30 p.m. on our Facebook page. Once again, my name is Aston. I have been talking with Karia White. Thank you very much, Karia.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I will see you all next time.